The Jim and Terry Show minus Jim for another podcast, coming to you from the Hospital Studio in Bobcaygeon, under the category of things that are challenging, things that don't make sense, the need to be careful with one's words. How about that as a general catch-all for all of this? And I'm referring to a couple of things, and I'll hope to hop, skip, and jump through this podcast with just things in the news. Have you heard? That's the theme of the Jim and Terry Show. So in case you want to sit for a bit, pull up a chair, grab a coffee or your favorite beverage, and take a listen to the tabletop discussion, the Tim Hortons conversation. Maybe I shouldn't even drop a brand in there. Two guys getting together to chat. Jim is chatting in my head. You know he's conservative. You know he represents things socially conservative, religiously conservative, things that are politically conservative. And yet he's found some middle ground, some place where we hope most people will abide. And that voice of Jim is talking on the right side of my brain this morning. So Jim, you're in there living rent-free in the Hobbit hole in absentia while he enjoys the rest of his vacation. Hope you're enjoying yourself, Jim, and we look forward to your return. In the meantime, what's going on? Well, I'm going to take my Have You Heard from the CBC website. Welcome to the latest and now very embarrassing era of Canada's foreign policy. You may have heard since the sort of, I don't think it was impromptu. It was a scheduled visit, but Zelensky came, I think it was Friday, made a speech to the House of Commons, went and had an impromptu session at the Governor General's residence, Rideau Hall, flew to Toronto, had a celebration of sorts, I guess, and then got a protest outside the Royal York with people, the same crowd who would yell F you or F Trudeau and raise, strangely enough, Nazi symbolism. We're outside that meeting, and yet we go back to the House of Commons, and all of a sudden stuff is hitting the fan. What kind of stuff? Well, it seems that a World War II veteran, and there aren't that many alive these days, so it is significant, and someone who was a member of the Speaker of the House's riding, Anthony Rota. Speaker of the House, impartial position, just, somebody who's like a stage manager, making sure that the rules for the Parliament are followed by everybody, making sure that people don't speak out of turn or use inappropriate language or break the rules of decorum in the body of the House of Commons. Well, that safe position became a pivotal point, became a position of what were you thinking when it was learned that the World War II veteran that the Speaker of the House decided to honor in a public way in front of Zelensky's visit turned out to be someone who served, in fact, for an SS group in Ukraine fighting the Russians. And I've been trying to find how many ways can you possibly slice this so that it, could be innocuous, and no matter how hard even I try, it's a bad look at worst. It's a worse look and a major ripple in the pond of foreign affairs for Canada. And I'll slice it in these ways. One, it's a bad look because the fellow was working with the Nazis. All right, so that's not, no matter how you try to slice that one, you can't crawl out from under that avalanche of people who are going to say, what were you thinking? How is this possible that in a modern democracy, a Nazi, well, maybe he wasn't a card-carrying Nazi, so we cut him some slack, and I've been trying to find out just who this fellow was and what his unit was. And if you want to slice it on the side of, well, it's a stretch, but could it possibly be that he was, fighting for Ukrainian independence against Russia? Well, that rings a current theme. And so should that be the reason why we honor this fellow? Well, that may be all you can get out of this in defense. The rest of it is just a bad look and a lack of knowledge of history. Distancing yourself from the Nazis should be the name of the game. And there should be no way that someone who was in service wearing a SS uniform, even though it's true his unit was fighting Russians, we got to remember that Russia was with the Nazis at the beginning of the war. When Poland was divided, it was agreed that Hitler would take half of it and Russia would take the other half. So that was already decided. Russia had already thrown their lot in with Hitler at the beginning of the war in 1939 when Poland was divided, and that kept the USSR out of the war at the beginning and allowed Hitler to focus entirely on the western flank and take out all of Western Europe, including the French, and was only thwarted with the notorious, the infamous, the battle in the skies over Britain. The Battle of Britain was a turning point for the war. But up until 1941, when Hitler decided, well, if I can't take Britain, I'm going to take, what, the rest of Poland? The rest of Eastern Russia? What does he want? Well, he wanted, and if you followed the movie The Battle of Stalingrad, you know that by 1942, he wanted the petroleum. He wanted the oil. And where was that? Down in Ukraine. And that's where he was going to go. So, yeah, Ukraine got thrown into the mix, and there were some confusion as to who are we fighting and why. But this fellow, I don't think there's any confusion that you got yourself into a world of grief. Is it the Liberal government who's in a world of grief? If you're a conservative, you probably want to throw it like, a cream pie. Throw it like French fries with ketchup like Trump does in the Oval Office wall. Throw something and hope it sticks to Trudeau. It's Trudeau's fault. That's the conservative Pierre Poilievre strategy. Blame Trudeau. I'm not sure. I listened to the NDP critic, and he seemed to find a middle ground that said, the Speaker of the House really messed this one up. Should have vetted the sources, and now the motion is being put forward that the Speaker should resign. I'm tending to think the damage is so significant that he will be forced, even though he's been a great Speaker for the House of Commons. I think it may be necessary to say, well, that was a real political international gaffe. Makes Canada look bad, makes the House of Commons look bad. I mean, you don't want to have people giving a standing ovation to a Nazi. So even if he's not a card-carrying Nazi, he's wearing the SS uniform. And yeah, this is not good. Okay, so let's get it all. Air your dirty laundry. Have some heads on a platter, because like John the Baptist, that's what you do. Put his head on a platter and hope that, the water's calm. Eventually the problems go away. Well, that's the big one. The embarrassing kickoff. Now, I can't imagine what Zelensky is saying in private conversations with Trudeau. Trudeau, who's been an ally, Chrystia Freeland, who's been an ally, and I think Anand has been an ally. The whole cabinet of the Liberal government has been an ally with Ukraine. We're hanging in there tough with you. We will support you. It's pretty tough when the photo op that's going around is of Zelensky fist bumping an SS soldier from World War II. Yeah, not a good look. And I'm embarrassed. As a Liberal supporter, as an NDP supporter, I'm embarrassed. As a Canadian, I'm embarrassed. So there is something that needs to be done. That's one thing that's going on. And I've tried to be as fair as possible to the Speaker of the House and as fair as possible to history, and the notion that You donned a uniform in defense of Ukraine, and that was maybe at one point to go against Russia, because Russia did invade, did take over in World War II at the beginning until 1941. And then to wear the Nazi uniform after that means you're fighting the Russians, not joining them. You're fighting against them. It's difficult. So the clearest pathway, have nothing to do with it. I'm referring to an article in what I have found to be a balanced presentation. Forward Magazine, which is a Jewish independent nonprofit, posted a picture of the fellow who was Yaroslav Honka, who was in the regiment, I forget what group it was, the Galicia, 1st Galician unit. Yeah, it's tough, but anyway, you got to take a look at both sides as much as you can and slice it the best way you can. Yes, there should be a consequence, and yes, it's embarrassing. Other things that are embarrassing, in a world of things that don't make sense, you have Trump giving speeches where he's comparing himself to Bush. Which Bush? First one or second one? And about Joe Biden starting World War II with Russia? China? What? Yeah, so when you've got some issues where Trump's up in the polls, but he's not saying things that make sense, that's a little concerning. So things that don't make sense, that don't add up, seems to be a theme. Polls that suggest Pierre Poilievre is leading, the Conservatives towards a victory in a next election, hypothetical matchup with Trudeau, despite all the policies and procedures that Trudeau has been responsible for. I'm not sure that any of this makes sense. Sticking it to Trudeau, Pierre Poilievre, that doesn't make sense. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of F. Trudeau stuff going around these days. I'm not sure that makes sense either. All right, Jim and Terry Show wrapping up. Bye-bye.